I and my business partner, and we live in Taiwan, decided we wanted to do computer stuff here, but we don't want to come here because we don't like this, what would you say, socialist nightmare. So in any event, what do we got left for time? Okay, so we don't want to get involved in a socialist nightmare. You come over there and we say we want to invest. And so what we want you to do is operate our investment in the States. Could you do that? Now you would be operating, if you will, in the contract. So you could do nothing that we didn't want done, right? And yet you wouldn't be a DBA, would you?
Not necessarily.
So you'd be representing the contract. And that's all it would be. So you don't have to file that. But it's just another way to look at things. It's one of the best ways. It beats a trust.
I'm led to believe that DBA is doing business as.
That's correct. DBA is doing business as. Of course, you could call it a lot of other things too.
Dwayne,
Yeah.
in your scenario, quickly, with a driver's license, would that scenario still hold?
Well, the driver's license, if you're applying for one, you should apply for one if you need it. So there's nothing wrong with you operating for profit and gain on the highway if that's what you choose, but you're limited by the license.
Well, I know, but you were carrying food to the farmer.
No, it's not a licensable or regulatable activity. See, where I come from, it's accepted fact that no license can be required to sell or peddle the produce of the farm or garden. That's what the law says.
So in this scenario, one has nothing to do with the other. In other words, you're carrying food to the farmer, and the officer says, you don't have a license. And you say, well,
I'd say your powers of observation are not diminished by your age. Yeah. But nonetheless, I use a commercial license on a regular basis. And what I use it for is to establish that I'm not engaged in a regulatable activity. And the scenario goes thusly. Were I to misrepresent to the state that coming to visit you people was a licensable activity, I would be violating their obligation not to regulate the right of the people to peaceably assemble. Because if peaceable assembly requires that I get their permission to do so, it's obviously not a right. It's now a privilege. So conversely, the use of the public way for profit and gain is regulated, provided I've set up the business on the highway, or the use of the highway is the business, which a corporation would do. A fiction is immune from what we say prosecution, except to the extent of its asset value. So it's licensed. So if it injures you on the highway, it must be able to pay for the cost or the injury. You, on the other hand, are subject to the common law right, which is to make me whole for every injury to my person, property, or character. There's no correlation between the two. If I have to have a license to go down to get a license, I'm never going to get there. It doesn't make sense. It's absurdity. So what you're doing then is admitting that you need a license. So you're hiring public transportation, which is licensed, to take you down to obtain a license. You know, it's asininity. Yet 90% of the population believes you have to have a license. I submit that if I had a marriage license, I'm married to all the women in here. No, it's very singularly relegated to that particular application. So when I apply for a license, it's to do that which, by law, would be illegal, unlawful, a tort, or a trespass. Okay? And coming to see you guys isn't illegal, a tort, or a trespass. Nor could it constitute it if I did it at 90 miles an hour. It just I got here faster. Some of these traffic issues, we don't have time to go from now. We got about 2 minutes left. When we get after the break, we'll hit some of them. Some of the traffic issues are so entertaining, and yet they're very informative when you try to put this together. If you were to admit to a police officer that, or if I were to admit to a police officer that I required a license to get down here, it could be construed to be a violation of federal law, which is giving false information regarding interstate commerce. I'm not in interstate commerce. Yet crossing straight lines or state lines would involve interstate commerce according to their reasoning. So the gentleman from Hawaii, Zane, who's been charged with what we say falsifying Hawaiian material or falsifying government documents, Texas has no capacity to enforce Minnesota law or Hawaiian law. So for them to charge it is false. In fact, it's criminal. And then for them to say that he falsified their paperwork is just patently wrong. There's nothing in Hawaiian law that I'm aware of that says you can't change anything on the form to correct it. You know, if the form is misprinted and it says asshole size, and you put it, oh, I see, hat size is what it meant. So you just, you don't have to put this down. But that's what they're telling you, that it would be a criminal act to do so. But nonetheless, a lot of this is just plain good entertainment when you get up and do it. We have applications in Minnesota that are separate, so a commercial application is different. And some of the questions are unanswerable. You know, they have one question on the test that says that if you're going down the highway, now this presumes you're driving a truck, and you're expected to stop in a reasonable distance. Is that distance the length of a football field, twice the length of a football field, or the length of a soccer field? And I said, I don't play football. How the hell would I know? No, I don't play soccer either. So these questions are just out of the blue, and these guys sit down and dream up this crap, and you're supposed to respond to. Now, they did change that question because I made so much of a stink out of it. But they think that everybody's involved in their activities. In any event, what do we got left on that, Peter? 2? Oh, 3. So, well, we have time for a quick story. I had a gentleman that followed me from the southern part of the state in a truck. And as we were coming up across the line, and I have a truck, and I go by this weigh station, and which is a no-no. You can't go by a weigh station if you're driving a truck. Now, this truck happened to be my transportation. It was just a good bargain, and I couldn't resist it, and I like big wheels. So I'm banging up down the highway with this thing, and the guy behind me gets on the radio and says, hey, you missed the weigh scale. I said, no, I didn't miss it. I'm not engaged in that activity. I'm not going to stop. So, and this is right near the Minnesota border. So pretty soon here's this Iowa patrolman. He comes up there, and I park literally right on the line. So the truck's half in and half out. And he comes up to my truck and said, I need to see some identification. And I do my standard dog and pony show. And ask him if you know, it would be advisable for me to remain silent, or was he going to arrest me? And he says, well, I'm going to arrest you if you don't give me some identification. So just hold out your hands. You know, what's he arresting you for? There's no law. And in particular in Minnesota, they actually enforce this, the right to remain silent. So, of course, he's in Iowa yet, and I'm in Minnesota. But he's standing there, and he's got this thrilled look on his face because he's going to have a truck to confiscate, and he's going to have somebody to incarcerate. And I'm just living it up, you know, because I got a driver's license in my pocket. I just can't show you unless you let me mislead you. So I'll tell you any lie you want to hear. Okay? And he says, you better not lie to me. I said, well, I said, good evening, officer. That's a lie. It's neither good, and neither is it evening. Of course, it was afternoon, but it's neither good nor was it evening. And I doubt you're an officer. Right? Officers are, if you will, by appointment. Well, you're a paid employee. You punch a time clock. And he said, well, that may be true, but I'm still a police officer. I said, well, police is the word for policy. Its root is policy. So you're a policy officer at best. He said, I ain't putting up with this blankety blank stuff. And so now my friend's coming up behind, and he parks behind the policeman, and he gets nervous. The policeman does. Because, you know, two big trucks, one has to back up, the other has to go forward. But nonetheless, and I'm making hand signs, you know, just for giggles. And this policeman is extremely nervous, so he goes back to his car, and you hear him calling for backup. And I said, well, tell him to park at least, 15 feet behind his truck, because we have another truck coming, and we want to be able to, which is not true. But they don't care. Anyhow, pretty soon you've got the third police car lined up there, and I'm still making my hand signs, doing this thing. And they finally get the idea that you're just jerking them around. Now, the question was, why didn't you stop at the scale? Okay. And of course, I said the scale wasn't open. And he said, everybody saw it was open. I said, now you know why they don't let me drive a truck. But he finally talked me into giving a driver's license so that he could look at it, and confirmed his worst suspicions that, this guy was trying to engage him in something unlawful. And I even told him I have a piece of plastic for morons, idiots, half-wits, and assholes. But otherwise I wouldn't show it to anybody normal. When the lieutenant came up for his support, he decided that it was worth seeing, even if he had to take that kind of abuse. So now when you get to it, what are you looking at? I'm not engaged in a regulatable activity. This truck has nothing on it. It's got my sleeping bag at the back end, but that's all it has, and it's my private conveyance. It's not registered for highway use. So now, any farmer in Minnesota would tell you that you don't have to register trucks in Minnesota, and yet almost all of them do, right? Because they don't want to be stopped. We proved it. I've parked my trucks unregistered on the highway because I own a farm, and dared them to give me a ticket. They just don't do it. Now, when you're least expecting it, they do it. Right? They tow you. So you have to, count the cost. Are we out of here now?
Keep going.
Okay. But in any event, when we get into the courtroom scene again, in fact, we were going to set up a jury trial just so you guys get a chance to see how it's played. You only got one on that? Is that what you're saying?
No, 1 minute, 1
1 minute? Okay, yeah, then we're going to take
Okay,
a break.
we're going to take a break.
We are, he said as he stumbled uncontrollably for the equipment, we are going to take a break. Mr. Rogers is available on a fee basis for you consulting on your legal problem. We will also remind you that
To him, and you say, if you give me immunity, I can't give it to you unless you give me immunity. Where does that relate back to the Constitution?
Oh, well, immunity in that sense is the right not to be compelled to give evidence which would be used against you in a criminal case. The question basically is based on whether or not if you require or if you deny a police officer access to a driver's license in your possession. And of course, my theory is that if you're not engaged in the activity for which a license is required, it would affect a criminal offense on your part. In effect, you're misrepresenting what you're doing as opposed to misrepresenting the license. In constitutional parlance, it's unlawful for you to, what we say, deceive any official of government in the performance of their duties. So I just always relate it back as if I'm stopped, is this a criminal investigation that you're stopping me for? If the answer is no, I'll see you later. If the answer is yes, would you punish me if I exercise my right to remain silent? Would you compel me in a criminal case to give evidence which you intend on using against me in violation of your oath of office? And so it comes down rather persuasive on your side for a change. I have a question, sir.
In Texas, the statutes say that you can be required to identify yourself if you're under arrest. You're clearly under arrest when they stop you on the streets.
Well, actually, if that's true, then when they apprise you of your right to remain silent, they just made a mockery out of the case. And of course, the case comes, Miranda versus Arizona says that where rights secured by the Constitution are in question, there shall be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them. Texas constitutional law, Article 1, Section 29, says that these rights hereby secured are of such high powers, we declare that everything in the Bill of Rights is accepted out of the general powers of government. So the right to remain silent is therewith in force. So your position is that I would gladly honor you if it didn't cause you to violate your oath of office, officer.
Well, the last time I was stopped, I asked him, am I under arrest? The first thing. He said, oh, you're not going to jail or anything. But he wouldn't tell me whether I was under arrest. Yet
well, you can force the issue.
Case law says that I was under arrest because I was deprived of freedom to move.
But the next question is, if I'm not under arrest, am I free to go? If I'm free to go, then we don't have a problem. If I'm not free to go, is the next question you ask me going to be used to further your inquiry? Because that's really all you're doing. What's fun is when you get them on the witness stand, because all of this rhetoric doesn't do you any good if you don't know how to use it. So when you get into the courtroom and you've declined to offer a driver's license to the police officer, and in this state he would charge you with failure to identify yourself, although I think they can't charge you with failure to identify yourself unless you're already arrested on a valid charge.
Or detained.
Or detained. Yeah, that's even more interesting. Brown versus Texas would overturn that. So because Brown versus Texas says explicitly that a policeman can ask you any question he wants. You are not required to respond in any manner. So what would you do with a deaf mute? Should this guy be in jail forever? But nonetheless, when you put him on the witness stand, things are even more interesting, because now you can ask the officer the questions that he's been longing to hear from you. In other words, aside from the probable cause things, I don't know how many people go through probable cause hearings or omnibus hearings or anything else in criminal cases, and because basically today we're working with civil, not criminal, I won't get too far into it. But if you're at the probable cause hearing, the first thing the police officer has to state is why he stopped you, which effectively should state the facts relating to the events. So he's going to say, I was monitoring traffic, and I was on duty, and I was on watch, and as I was monitoring traffic, I saw this car come flashing by me, and that constituted probable cause. Now, he can also say that he's been a policeman for 10 years, and he's able to observe the relative speed of vehicles, etc. But what he can't say is whether or not the vehicle was engaged in an activity for which it was made itself subject to the speed laws. Now, there are common laws with respect to speed, in that you can't intentionally injure another, and if you do cause even fright in another, that you have, or you owe them at least that measure of respect so that you wouldn't cause them to be frightened. But if you're going on the highway at 60 as opposed to 55, I doubt if that could be fairly pleaded. Conversely, if you have a truck on your tail that's doing 85 and you're stupid enough to stay at 55, you ought to get your tail kicked. Yeah, Kester?
You sound pretty knowledgeable on this. Maybe you can answer this question that nobody's been able to answer yet.
I know I'm being set up now.
The so-called traffic laws, such as speeding, et cetera, are under Vernon civil statutes.
Right.
Civil. And yet policemen can arrest you. Basically, the citation is an arrest, which is criminal.
Sure.
How do you get from civil jurisdiction into criminal?
You don't lawfully, but I'll tell you how they're doing it. The rationale behind it is that the motor vehicle codes in all states are civil. They have criminal penalties because they involve contracts. So there's an inference, if you will, in the statute that anybody that's upon the highway is subject to the laws of the state respecting the use of that highway, which is a fair presumption unless it's rebutted. So if you look it up in the Black's Law Dictionary under due process, that no presumption of fact can be assumed against you because it would be violative of due process of law. And there's a case cite for it, but I don't know what it is. In any event, what they've done is cross the boundary to put everybody in the military. So in effect, if I came to anybody in this room, I could establish for purposes of the Admiralty that all of you are AWOL from Fort Benning, Georgia. And because none of you have any papers to disprove that claim, you would have to stand before the magistrate. And now it's a plea and bar. So if you want to use the old terms. But nonetheless, you would be foolish to plead at all. You would let me bear the burden. So I go in there as the Admiral's servant, and I show that this individual failed to display leave papers of any nature. And sure enough, the Admiral would say, "Is that true, soldier?" And you'd say, "Excuse me, soldier, did you say?" I wasn't in the military. I've been in the military in the last 40 years. Oh, MP, now you got a problem. Except these judges are as blind as they are illiterate. And it doesn't help you to go in there and say, "I don't understand," because they don't care if you don't understand. Your best defense is a good offense, which is why you set all this up. And then if you were doing what I was doing, you could explain that it would be unlawful for you to give evidence that you were in the military if you were not. It would be unlawful for you to have in your possession leave papers or authenticated leave papers from the military if you were not in the military. Equally, it would be unlawful for you to misrepresent the capacity in which you were acting. If you're on your way to get a license, it would be inappropriate for you to say that you had to have a license to do so. But that's what they're implying. So while they are acting under the criminal side of the Admiralty law, they're not telling you that, which is one of the things. There was an old gentleman that used to go around the country, Howard Friedman, that had this down to a science. Now, I wouldn't do what he does, obviously, because Howard knows what he knows and I know what I know. But in any event, the same capacity to ask questions is still there. You can always ask them under what rules you're being tried. And they'll say the the state code of criminal procedure. So now you can say, well, does this govern common law? Does this govern Admiralty law? Or does this govern, if you will, criminal, the side of Admiralty law? And he's going to be puzzled, which doesn't bother you at all because you don't really care what he's saying. What you're trying to point out is that you haven't been notified. Right? And there are no published rules for traffic courts. That's where they got you. And that the traffic code is found on the civil side, and that you're unable to equate the two. Although we've been able to do this on discovery. If you're charged with violation of not having a driver's license, you immediately contact the Secretary of Transportation and ask for evidence that there's no driver's license to be found for you, and they'll comply. You don't have a driver's license. So you can now go in and prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that these people have no evidence whatsoever of a driver's license being accredited to you. And all you proved is that the officer could have done the same thing. If the state didn't issue you a license, you couldn't very well show one. You couldn't very well claim one. And it had you said you had a license, or were you trying to show you had a license, that you would in fact be violating state law. What they're trying to do is compel you to say that you were supposed to have a license. So if you used the discovery procedures, you could now go to every state, see? And then when you got into court, you could offer evidence that every state had admitted that you didn't have a driver's license and that you weren't engaged in any regulatable activity that the state was aware of, because the Secretary of State will tell you that. So all you set up was the conditions that, to the best of their knowledge, all of these state representatives had established that you weren't involved in a regulatable activity for which a license was obtainable. It's just cut and dry. Now, you always leave one out, of course, and when they got done saying, well, that conclusively establishes that you don't have a driver's license anywhere. And you say, no, no, no. There are 183 licensing jurisdictions in the world, and I haven't contacted any but these 48. Right? So to prove that you don't have a driver's license is their burden, and you can help them. You can demonstrate. I've put them on the stand repeatedly. Same question. Did you check the jurisdiction that's immediately north of you, called Canada? And of course they don't. They don't have any communications with those. Are you positive that I am not licensed in Canada? Well, no, I'm not. Have you checked any of the provinces of Canada? Can you establish beyond a shadow of a reasonable doubt that I'm not licensed in any of the provinces of Canada? Now we're going to move to Europe, by the way. And so now have you been to Sweden with these inquiries? Are you absolute? Because they're going to say, well, what? They say the first condition they have is to prove your residency. And all they can do is say that you live at a certain address, and of course you can deny that. Remember, it's just a presumption thing. So you can establish unequivocally that you don't live at that address anymore, that you're alive and well in this courtroom at this minute and this hour. And these are all witnesses. As facetious as it sounds, that's what the meaning of the word is, unless you're involved in fictions, in which case you become resident. And the residence is a capacity whereby you can receive state privileges, i.e. license. And that'll put you right in that jurisdiction in a heartbeat. But I've had a real good time in court because I've, over the years, accumulated enough background to know how witnesses are set up. And I love expert witnesses. Expert witnesses are the most fun to toy with. We have a couple of knowledgeable people in here who know what I'm talking about, because every expert has an ego problem. He's being paid. So the first thing that you attack is it likely that we could change your opinion if we paid you more money? Now, the question is rhetorical, but nonetheless, the jury's made quite aware of it. You know, that this is a paid whore, a paid informant. And as you expostulate on that, they become, what would you say, titillated, because your next question is usually in the same line. Did you rehearse what you were going to say? Now, if he says no, then how did you become expert in what you're doing? Okay. If you didn't rehearse, if you didn't practice. So all of these things are scheduled, and usually if you use this trial book, you'll write all this down. You know, how to handle the particular experts. We have an expert that always shows up from the Department of Transportation that won't show up if I'm on the trial, because we've ridiculed him so bad. You know, he's a highway engineer that knows absolutely nothing, right? He's like a toad. He just sits on the highway waiting to get run over. So that's what we use him for. But he's an interesting character because he always testifies to the same thing. And invariably he'll testify that the speed law in Minnesota is not 55, because even though the statute or the sign says 55, it's 65. Because there was an emergency, a gasoline shortage emergency, however contrived. The legislature reduced the speed law until emergency was over. So all you have to do is find out availability of gasoline throughout the state. You can do this through AAA, and AAA can be your expert witness. And if there's no emergency, then the law is not effective. Right? And this guy will testify right out of the law book that the speed limit in Minnesota is 65, because that's what it says. And so now, how much trash are they going to have to eat? So they don't even show up anymore. Usually they do their best to, you know, admit defeat, walk away, and we start over again. Yes, ma'am. Oh, I'm that old. Thank you. Nonetheless, as you get more expertise in this, and I would suggest, and I heartily recommend you start a class of some sort that just practices in the courtroom. You can go visit courts. It's a good way to start. And then, like I said, we used to just write down the title for everybody that you wanted to have an actor for in the courtroom. And it's the guy walks in, he draws it out of the hat. So you don't know if you're going to be the judge or a juror. You don't know if you're going to be an expert witness. You don't know if you're going to be what. So when you walk in, you're now in for a surprise, and you become rather versed in what you're doing. And it's very laid back, although some people are just as nervous in class as they are in the courtroom. I have yet to be in the courtroom, by the way, that I didn't have sweaty palms. Sometimes butterflies got out of formation in my guts, or things like that. But it's never failed. And yet that's when I'm at my best. If I'm nervous, I'm at least aware If you're not nervous, you're cold and indifferent, which is the nature of most lawyers. They've been there too often. Excuse me, most judges, they've been there so often, they're immune. I happen to be of the opinion that a little bit of laughter in the courtroom is good, and I don't mind being the source of it either. So I usually laugh at myself. I tell them how stupid I am and how ignorant and how funny it feels to be up here trying to convince people who obviously know more than I do that they don't know what they know. And that's exactly the response you get. But anyhow, I've had a few judges admonish me for it, and most of them no longer are cynical about it. Some of them used to be facetious, but if you happen to be a judge and you admonish me facetiously, I'm going to humble myself, because I'm going to say, do you want me to prostrate myself before you right now? How can I again gain your pleasure, or whatever it takes? So they don't do that anymore. They just say, Mr. Rogers, we have been here before. We are not going to go through this anymore, because I've been known to grovel, and groveling is very amusing to somebody who's never been there before. In any event, as you get into this ritual of practicing in the courtroom, and I suggest that you get a copy of the state constitution and remember the first 29 sections, get a copy of the rules of courtroom procedure, and by all means practice it. Among yourselves, send a deposition, or notice of deposition, requests for admissions, requests for interrogatories, learn how to write interrogatories, learn how to avoid conclusionary allegations. You'd be amazed at how critical you are of each other, and nobody's going to influence you. No lawyer's going to shut you down. You can make pretend suits, or you can get real ones. I was telling a guy that one of the best ways of removing yourself from the public view is to lose everything you have. So if you were foolish enough to cross horns with me, and we got into a contest, and I sued you, and you agreed with me out of court that you didn't want to go to court with me, and I took everything you had, you would have effectively lost everything you had. Right? It's totally lawful, too, by the way. So there are a lot of things you can do that you haven't imagined yet, and you'll learn a lot about it if you practice courtroom procedure. Every lawyer wishes that he had a group like this to play with. Really, I don't know any lawyer who wouldn't. I have lawyers that call me up and pay me to sit down and trade barbs with them. You know, I'm probably the worst witness you could have. You know, first, you know, I don't do oaths very well, and when I do, it's very disruptive to the courtroom and the jury. So the last thing you want is somebody like me, if you happen to be the prosecuting attorney, or excuse me, the prosecuting attorney, I'm on your team, and I come in there and you're unprepared for a witness. So they use me to practice on witnesses, which is kind of a neat deal, because if they ask me to raise my right hand, I'll volunteer my left foot and pass gas. One's as effective as the other as far as belief in me. I usually intersperse that I'm a compulsive pathological liar, and I'm very good at it. Now you're disposed, if you happen to be on the jury, you're going to wake up. You know, most of them come alive at this point, and because trials are boring to most people. But if you're faced with a witness like that, you're going to be awake. So now a lawyer who is intent on boning up on his courtroom skills finds me a challenge, you know, because that's good. And they're not upset by it. They know you're just a smart ass looking for an audience. No. But you get in that courtroom, they'll find out. I've had judges really try to grill me, which, strangely enough, I mean, that's an adrenaline rush for me, because I'm thinking inside, I bet you can't. No. And so you got this arrogant attitude that starts showing through, and they're doing their best. I'll hold you in contempt if you don't answer this question. Oh, God, please don't hold me in contempt. Which is Brer Rabbit saying, don't get me near the briar patch. I would know what to do. You see, because the next thing he's going to do is get answered with a question. So he says, would you state your name for the record? Are you going to hold me contempt if I ask that question or answer that question? Excuse me, if I answer that question. And he said, well, no, I told you I'd hold you in contempt. You didn't answer the question. I don't know the answer. I can't state my name for the record. I'm so intimidated I can't even think about it. So now you're going to throw... But you see what happens to it? And they are not always pleased with the results. Nonetheless, if you happen to get a witness on the stand that's that way, I can show you how to handle him. You know, it's kind of neat. The more perverse you are, the more you know about being perverse, right? So you can usually undo what they can do also. So nonetheless, if somebody told me they're a compulsive pathological liar, I'd tell them to prove it. Now, we need some sort of proof, because if you're a liar, you're not to be believed. Right. So, of course, now, It is so destructive of common sense and reasoning that people can't imagine how you'd believe a compulsive pathological liar. Actually, that's the only reason to believe him, because he is. Now, if you have the opportunity to cross-examine somebody like that you know is a liar, I mean, I'd like to have this Mr. Furman out there in California. He would be choice, because he's got an ego. And all you'd have to do is, it's called leading, and at that point, any judge would let you have him as a hostile witness. So you can be leading, or you can't be suggestive, but usually leading is suggestive. So you can do a lot of those things. If you're familiar with the forms of objections, though, they couldn't do it. Right? So, I mean, there's lawyers that are so good with objections that you can't ask questions of them. And, of course, there's lawyers that are so bad they don't know how to object. And personally, I like the kind that make a lot of objections, because then you have a chance, if you will, to think. And invariably, if you are the witness, the best responses you can give are still the same. And I've prepared a lot of people for juries and grand juries. Gee, if you're not honest with yourself, the first thing I try to do is get you to see that you don't know what you know. It's what you know that ain't so that's got all of you confused. So even the strange things like, where do you live, is best answered directly. Oh, I'm right here, I'm alive. And if they ask you, well, don't you live at 318 Marshall Street? You can say, well, sir, that'd be misleading you. I'm alive here. Right? Because they're really asking you is, where do you have your business set up? Or they say home. Business and home are almost synonyms in legal contemplation. So most businesses have home offices. But because you're not caused to think of that, you're never given that opportunity. So I usually do it the other way around. I'm unable to answer the question based on the method of postulation. And you go, huh? Yeah, you see, if I said that I lived there, you'd say, well, this fool's a liar. He's obviously alive here. Or he's good at projecting. But nonetheless, I couldn't answer the question the way it's postulated. He said, well, perhaps you could tell us in your own words. Oh, yeah, I'd like to do that. But I forgot them, too. But you can do this almost nonstop. And in fact, we've done it in depositions to where the lawyers have just become enraged, and they'll attempt to bring sanctions against you. And I've had judges sit up shop at the deposition, so they just bring the deposition.
This is Bruce Hoare in Brookhaven. A year goes by, 2 years go by, and they cannot keep up with the tapes. This is BCAT, Brooklyn Community Access Television. He gave me his word that he would return those tapes to me if I sent him a box and the postage. He went back on his word. Well, he said that he hoped a box would come in today, and then he'd return them to me. $6 worth of postage should return more like 40 tapes, 40 VHS. This is Bruce Hoare in Brookhaven.
Okay. All right. Did you know that computers are in the Bible? Adam, Eve said to Adam, "Do you want an apple too?"
You know, I use Macintosh. Sure. Keep me in mind. Stay in touch.
Well, BronxNet is always a bunch of recorders, and if you stick with it long enough, you dial 10 different times, finally you get somebody, and then you ask for somebody, and finally you get somebody to come to the phone. And Diane Barreto did come to the phone, and she hasn't sent out the tapes yet. She did not receive the applications, and I talked to her about changing the times without even telling me, and she said, you don't like them, and so I conceded, okay, I guess it's all right. In the Bronx, Chat with Glendora is on at 11 p.m. on Tuesday, and 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, I believe. That's the BronxNet. Their management is horrible. Horrible. Not as bad as BCAT, but almost. Not as bad as Brooklyn Community Access Television, but almost. This is Jim Lehman in
emphatically, but that
Orangetown, Rockland County.
cameraman is not a Cablevision cameraman.
No, I know. You told me that.
No, I told you that I was told that it wasn't a Cablevision cameraman.
Oh.
See, I was told that, but here's what happened is that the reason why I was, I suspected, I was told that we corroborated one another was the fact that the size of this camera that they were using is a huge, big, huge camera, like a professional camera, and it's not a little camera car like you have, I have. So I said, well,
This is about Cablevision Rockland.
find out about this. If he can get a person to come out and film something, why can't I get it? So, well, I found it, that's not the case. The only thing that they give out is a big, huge camera. Now, I'm talking about the one that takes the actual 8mm.
VHS, I think he's talking about, half-inch. Thank you, Jim Lehman, for signing for Lori Galgano in Rockland County. He hasn't filed his lawsuit yet against Charles Dolan, Cablevision, the municipalities, and the Public Service Commission, and the New Jersey Utilities Commission.
That's just some of the work, and it's just a question of so scrap for time and the trouble. It's like you have to think for two people, so I don't.
What else you working on besides helping your wife?
Oh man, I have so many others. I have, like, I'm writing this column. I'm
Writing a column,
pro bono to help someone.
trying to help somebody get out of prison who was put there unjustly
On an appeal.
by McMahon.
That wasn't ongoing. And I'm doing some investigative work on the sludge and dumping and the recycling operation. I think I was telling you about that. In fact, I just came back from the, it was supposed to be a bid opening. It's a big long story, but that's a few of the things that I'm working on. And
Jim Lehman's writing had a lot to do with getting rid of Grebitz and Adler and people who were cheating the public in Rockland County.
that any counties, suburban counties where the money is in the land development. And the people who are in the know, the lawyers and what have you,
They're supposed to build one house on an acre,
project.
but they double that and get twice as much money, and the land is going for $300,000 an acre, so you double the money by...
Property. Let's say it's 2 acres, 2 acres long, 2 acres, and then you're only permitted 1 house per acre. But sometimes they have what they call density, area density. But if I can get 3 lots out of them 2 lots, I mean, now each lot, depending on where you're out, sure, in Westchester County, a lot is like $300,000, just a lot alone. So you can imagine if you multiply this by, if you have someone comes in with a 20-acre parcel, and they can now double the amount of parcels that they can put on their from 20 to 40. Now you just multiply 20 times $300,000, and you can see how much money is involved in this land development. And so this is really a corrupt system. In fact, this is why Adler is going to jail. This is part of the scheme. In fact, that's what got him started on that. He was acting on behalf of some builder to induce somebody on a planning board to give them extra lots. So that
How long?
a lot alone. So you can imagine if you multiply this by, if you have someone comes in with a 20-acre parcel, and they can now double the amount of parcels that they can put on their from 20 to 40. Now you just multiply 20 times $300,000, and you can see how much money is involved in this land development. And so this is really a corrupt system. In fact, this is why Adler is going to jail. This is part of the scheme. In fact, that's what got him started on that. He was acting on behalf of some builder to induce somebody on a planning board to give them extra lots. So that
How long of a sentence did Bryant give to Adler? He says about 19 months.
I'm not sure. I haven't followed up on that.
Where did they send him? He said up to the country club, up to the firm.
It's close to a family. You can have.
Yeah, but that's the thing that they usually work against. They get you as far away from the family as they can.
Well, I don't think so.
Jim Lehman, Rockland County, Orangetown.
I'll stay in touch.
Are you going to ever put on a TV show?
He should.
I don't have the time. Okay, I gotta get running now.
Okay, computers are in the Bible. Eve said to Adam, do you want an apple too?
That's a good one.
Okay, Jim.
The next report, we've uncovered another bad United States District Judge, Patricia Gone, in the United States District Court in Cleveland.
Thank you for calling the United States District Court for the North. Please wait while I transfer your call.
Always press 0. When you call a U.S. District Court, just press 0.
Clerk's office? Clerk's office? Can you or Judge Gao tell me? Judge Gone? Oh, how do you spell it, please? G-A-U-G-H-A-N. Okay, G-A-U-G-H-G, like girl. H-A-N. Uh-huh. Gone, you pronounce it. Yeah. Here today and gone tomorrow? Right, exactly. Okay. There's a joke about that. Why did the bunny rabbit want to be changed into a goon in the next day? I have no idea. So he could be here today and goon tomorrow? Call them to see, to find out, can you find out if, he has, my, motion for default judgment? I had sent it in and it got lost. And it got lost along with the, complaint, and it was Judge, your chief judge, Micaiah. Yeah, and Micaiah took care of having the complaint filed, and you people were nice enough. Yeah, I see a number here. Yeah, what is it? 02CV, 1989. What's your question? My question is, did you ever find the motion for default judgment that I filed? In this case, in 02-1989? Yeah. This was closed October 29th. It was closed? Mm-hmm. You were probably issued a copy in the order. Is your correct address P.O. Box 416, White Plains, New York, 10602? Yes. You didn't get anything in the mail on it? No. But that's all right. It might be along. Memorandum pending an order granting plaintiff's request for receipt of form of papyrus. The action is dismissed pursuant to 28 U.S.C. sections 1406A and 1915E. Court certifies an appeal from this decision could not be taken in good faith. What? An appeal cannot be taken in good faith? An appeal, right. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll appeal it anyway. I mean, I don't think that order can be taken in good faith. That's a terrible order. All right. Okay, so that's coming in? That's coming in then. That very bad order is coming in? It went out on the 29th, you said? I would imagine. Yeah. Okay, and your name's what? Kelly. Kelly. Mm-hmm. Okay, Kelly. Thank you. That's pretty bad news. We're going to have to do something. Who was the judge on that, Gone? Mm-hmm. And his first name is what? Patricia. Oh, her first name. Mm-hmm. Patricia. Okay, and she's a USDJ? Mm-hmm. All righty. Was there a magistrate on it? It's a random assignment of a magistrate. It was not referred to the magistrate. Okay, good. That's good. Because I didn't want it to go to a magistrate. Well, that's terrible, what they did. 250-page complaint with Bob Hope's picture in the back. That's awful. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Isn't that outrageous?
There's a who's who.
That's a who-to-who. That's a who-to-who. Well, the next failure to report on is Office Depot. They completely bombed out. They completely failed on ordering Chatwin Glendora labels. These labels must have been ordered at least 4 weeks ago. They still haven't got it together and got the labels in here. So Office Depot needs some management. Unbelievable how people stay in business treating the public the way they do. The next call was to MCI in Clinton, Mississippi, and Mr. Bert C. Roberts is located in Washington, D.C. So the letter of complaint that went to MCI in Mississippi has to be forwarded to D.C. And it was about MCI sending the bill to the wrong address. It got here late. We paid the bill when we got it. 2 days later, they turned off the service for 10 days. Brad Sachs is coming to see us on December 5th. He missed November. That's too bad. Portland, Oregon is shaping up. They will fill the box with tapes when they have a box full. I asked them to wait until they had enough tapes to fill the box, because that's the postage comes out a lot less that way. And Darrell Buell, the signer for Portland, Oregon, has he got an A in his biochemistry test, and he got an A in his biology test. And he's just about winding down undergraduate school and looking ahead to 4 years of pharmacy school.
I think that's only once that you went, right? That is correct.
Darrell was able to unload some investment property down in California, and his father was able to unload some in around Salt Lake City. So they're happy about that. They have as many problems out there as we do with the closing costs. His dream is to live in Montana because it's so beautiful there. He wants to live in Montana.
I'll end up with my PhD, but I don't think they'll call it a farm fee, but same difference.
What?
So I'll end up
Oh, farm fee?
a farm fee. Yeah.
PhD stands for Paul Higher Deeper.
There's a distinct component of that, yeah.
And MBA is more bad advice.
You have been down to a science study.
Yes, right. Okay, well that's good. Computers are in the Bible.
Oh?
Mm-hmm. Eve said to Adam, do you want an apple too?
Oh dear.
Okay, well I'm glad to be in touch with you. I don't think...
Darrell can't watch a chat with Glendora in Portland, Oregon. It's on at 7 p.m. Sundays, and the reason he can't watch it is that's when the biochem students all get together and study together and drink beer. Mm-hmm.
Donated our bodies to the New York Medical School.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when they're very nice to deal with. And they send you an application. It's very simple. When you fill it out, and you send it back to them, and then they send you a donor card that you carry with you. And you let everybody know, like a funeral director and everybody else.
Right. Now that's wonderful that people do that.
Yeah.
I won't actually get to that level of anatomy and physiology, but I'll take a basic class.
Oh, really?
If you get into medical school and do, they call it gross human anatomy, you're literally taking apart cadavers and delving all the way down to the most minute structures.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I talked to Columbia University about it. I always thought it'd be nice to go to Columbia. And I don't know, he was sort of arrogant and lifeless or dehumanized or whatever. And so I told him over my dead body. And then Yeshiva University, they had about 10 pages, and then they said they reserve the right to refuse the body. Then what do you do? What do you do then? And so then around here, New York is a pain in the gluteus maximus as far as regulating everything. And they said that there would be a chance of an autopsy, and then if there is an autopsy, then the body can't go to the medical school. So we never gone to doctors in our whole lives. We've never been to a medical doctor.
Really?
Yeah, Franklin had to, of course, in the Army, but we've never gone to doctors. And so I thought it'd be good to make a doctor contact, and, because in case of dying at home, you'd have to have a doctor, I guess, to keep the state from doing an autopsy. So I did that, and I came out with, they couldn't find anything to charge me for. And, but then Franklin was different, and I made the mistake of persuading Franklin to go to a doctor, so he'd have just a doctor contact. That's all, just a doctor contact. And this guy, it was 97 degrees and extremely humid on August 15th, and this doctor found Franklin with a pulse of 20. Well, I fully think that if Franklin had been brought home and put under the shade of his favorite pine tree and had iced tea and put cold water on his wrists and on his forehead, that he would have been fine, and put in his bed and gone to sleep, he would have been fine. But no, this doctor, against our consent, without our consent, rushed Franklin to the hospital in an ambulance.
Oh, dear.
And they put in an emergency pacemaker that night. And the next day they put in another one. And when they put in the second one, they pierced his lung. And he was on a gurgling machine for 8 days, trying to keep his lung, keep it from deflating.
Medical science is a wonderful thing.
Oh, yeah. You want to know what that cost? $58,000 for the hospital. And Medicare paid $57,000 and left Franklin with $800. And the ambulance cost $600. Medicare approved $400 and left Franklin with $80 to pay. The doctors are still sending bills, and they put in these X-ray machines, 2 or 3 times a day, totally unnecessary. You can see the dollar signs in their eyes. And so that was just that's a terrible thing. I mean, I thought lawyers and judges were bad, but they're easily surpassed by...
Then you get the medical profession.
Yeah, they're easily surpassed by doctors and hospitals and ambulance people. All right, then.
Yep.
I think this is terrific. Okay,
All righty.
so I'll talk to you again.
Okay.
I tell you about the 2 ships that collided. Yeah, this is a Navy joke. A freighter carrying a load of red paint collided with a freighter carrying a load of purple paint. And at last report, the crews of both ships were marooned.
All righty then. I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you. Bye-bye.
Darrell Buell in Portland, Oregon was in the Navy for 8 years. He was in submarine duty. Got a lot of respect for him, and we thank him for doing that. The next conversation is Doris in Nassau County, Long Island, a friend I treasure deeply, as I did Lindy Hartzman.
I jumped out so in the church. Yes, that's a beautiful tape. Beautiful tape, huh? Oh, thank you, Doris. I'm happy that reached you.
Yes, and you know what?
What?
I guess you don't realize it because you're doing so many things.
Yeah.
You're doing so many things, but if you get a chance, just look at it.
Yeah?
I was so happy to have you that they invited you to do the bell. Oh, I said, isn't that something?
It is. No, that's so nice to call you up and hear you tell about it and appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
That makes me feel good.
And you see what I just roll over in bed and the TV is already on 71. And I roll over and I look, but I don't have no pencil and paper to write nothing down, but I'm looking.
Well, now you said that was in the middle of the night?
That's around 11:30.
Around 11:30.
Yes.
Do you happen to remember what day it was?
No, and I don't think I wrote it on the calendar. I didn't get up.
Yeah, I was calling Franklin, right?
Yes.
Doris is talking about the program where Glendora went to church on September 11th, and the Hopewell Reformed Church was ringing the bell all day long for the people who died in September 11th attack on the World Trade Center. And I went to church to see if they needed any help to ring the bell. And the man at church invited me to ring the bell. And John Young took my camera and videotaped it for her. And this touched Doris very, very deeply. This is a nice thing about public access, folks.
And the last tape that I got...
Bob Clement calls Doris and tells her,
Special for number 3439.
program number 3439.
On October the 24th at 1 p.m. and 4:30 p.m.
Thank you, Bob Clement.
And I wonder if that's when I saw it, when I woke up at 1 p.m. Yeah, probably.
No, 1 p.m.'s in the afternoon.
Okay.
No, not 1 a.m.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Dora.
All right, so that's the only thing we
And
know.
thank you,
Right,
Bob
that's
Clement.
the only thing. I have not been sending them specials.
Okay.
I made 8 different programs last week, or last 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I usually would send them a copy of each one as specials, but I didn't. Instead, I sent each of those 8 programs that are specials, I sent them to different cable companies.
Very good.
Yeah.
So we may see you on Major TV. A note somewhere, and then I put it on here.
And you found it, yeah.
Yes.
Computers are in the Bible. Eve said to Adam, do you want an apple too?
All right.
This is George McDermott. I'd like to have you be in touch with him.
My number, let me give you my cell phone number.
Okay.
Okay, my cell phone is 240 601 7756.
Got it.
And my pager is 202 259
259.
259 8223.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got kind of crazy. I mean, I'm going into the U.S. tax court next week.
What's that about?
Well, I got a notice my wife had a refund due on we had a refund due.
Yes.
And then they garnished her refund for an alleged debt that I owe, even though the Internal Revenue Service will not allow me to see my own tax records from 1980 forward, which I have over $2 million in tax credits due to me.
Oh my goodness. 2 million?
Yeah. From 1979 to 1994, I built 2 businesses. I went from a one-man operation to where I built 2 businesses that had a combined employee payroll of 250 people, and I was doing $250,000 a month.
Marvelous.
And then I lost all of it for $5.
What?
I lost everything because of this judges of the courts. They took everything.
Did it start with that crooked partner?
Well, he was never a partner. The thing is the guy signed an agreement to buy somebody's shares, and he never fulfilled his contract. We removed him 11 months later after we found out he had embezzled $250,000 from us.
Wow.
And then the IRS made me come back in, me and my partners pay back all the money, because the money he embezzled were IRS funds. Employee withholding.
Oh.
Okay, so they won't prosecute him. Okay? And they know that the guy who bought the business from him, okay, allegedly bought it, who was the brother-in-law of the judge, he's a 2-time federal felon. I've got evidence of that. I've got his disbarment papers showing he admitted in
This is George McDermott, folks, in Maryland.
1961, the tax fraud, embezzlement. I mean, this guy's got a rap sheet a mile long, but because he's a brother-in-law of the judge, and we have a special law in the state of Maryland.
What's the name of that judge?
Thomas Smith.
Okay, I saw that in your Supreme Court.
Yeah. Well, see, so he controls the courthouse now.
What's the name of this guy?
It's Peter Parker Esquire.
This is George McDermott in Maryland, a great fighter for justice.
Okay. But, yeah, it's just one of the rules. It's a like a little secret rule that they have. It's a rule that they've created themselves, which is, it's a shame because we have people, we have rapists, we have murderers, we have everybody being, we have lobbyists for the state who have embezzled hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars from their clients, and the judges, it looks good in the paper does write up that they've been convicted, but 3 years later it doesn't show up on the record. Why? Because the judges, once we go to jail, the judges turn around and a couple of friendly judges get in a room and say, well, let's expunge his record, we'll give a little bit of kickback here and we'll be happy.
Oh, yeah.
We have a really crooked system.
Oh, it's abominable.
It is. I mean, you can see that the evidence is there. I mean, the FBI still will not allow me to see my records under the Freedom of Information Act. You have a copy of it. The request is there.
What is in your record, the FBI?
Huh?
What's in your record?
Oh, I'm sure there's tons and tons of stuff. I know probably 1,100 documents that I've put in there. I know that there are correspondence between members of the House and Senate to the Justice Department asking why,
Asking why what?
why they're getting bombarded with requests from me for investigation. Why the FBI is...
George McDermott in Maryland.
Take care of it, huh?
I mean, the FBI knew, actually, all the time I was asking for help from the FBI, from 1994 to 1997, okay? The FBI kept telling me there was no evidence of criminal activity. In 1998, I go into the U.S. courthouse, and I'm going to the computer to do a search, and I find out that the FBI and the U.S. attorney who I've been asking for help were in the exact next courtroom prosecuting these guys, okay, for other frauds.
And these guys' names?
The same names, the same judges are handling them, the same U.S. attorney.
What's the name of the guys?
It's Peter Parker, Esquire.
Yes.
Wayne A. Bowie.
Yes.
Okay.
And they're in the next courtroom prosecuting them.
And they got a $1.6 million judgment against them.
And they said no criminal activity.
That there was no evidence of criminal activity.
Now, who was the judge?
Massetti.
How do you spell it?
Massetti.
M as in Mary?
E-S-S-I-T-T-I.
And who was the U.S. attorney?
Lynn Bagliatella.
What? Lynn what?
Lynn Bagliatella. She's named, if you look at it, their names are right in the brief.
Oh, okay. I haven't got that far. I haven't.
You got all the copies of the signed orders from them and everything.
George McDermott, Maryland. Another account of how your courts have been ruined by evil judges and evil lawyers.
Okay. It's in the record, it's in the lodged appendix, and it's right in the, but you can find this stuff out, and, I know that, and then I did a lot of demonstrations at the FBI Justice Department with Amnesty International.
Yes.
And I've had the actual, they have a crew down there that comes out of the FBI and films shit.
They do?
Oh yeah, they came out, took pictures of me in my truck and everything. I said, hey, how you doing? Have a good day,
Oh, where? FBI located where?
Right to Pennsylvania Avenue.
Where?
It's the main headquarters.
Washington, D.C.?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
I'm doing it.
And then they put you in a file and say, watch this guy.
Well, this is true,
Yeah, and then they try to get you on something. Now, you don't have to do anything wrong to get arrested.
Well, there's so much media knows so much about this. I'm not the slice. I drove my truck around the building today.
You did?
Oh yeah, every day. Every day I get a chance, I drive my truck around the FBI building.
On Pennsylvania Avenue.
In the Justice Department.
Did they videotape you today?
tape ran out for it. This must be consolation to you people. Well, keep the courage, ladies. It's a beautiful world. Go out there and see the stars on a dark night and see how bright they are. And they are light, 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 light years away in this magnificent universe. Remember, you're very special. And it looks like owns 11. Page 28, that's got to be wrong. This has to be page 27. The odd numbers are on the right-hand side, right, Franklin? Thomas C. Dolan. And they have numbers in parentheses after their names. So what do those numbers mean? And these stockholders are really de minimis. So we move on to page 28. Nobody owns Class B but Dolan. Look into this. Paul J. Dolan. You remember, Franklin, when we were looking at the shareholders list, and the shareholders were from around Chardon, Ohio, just outside of Cleveland?
Yes.
Well, this is who it is. This is his brother. What's his brother's name? And son Paul. This is Franklin's electric razor. And it just it powders the whiskers. It really powders them. Soft, soft. It's not granulated, it's powder. And then it's a big job to get it out. This razor's in 4 parts. And it's a big job to get the parts all back together again. But it certainly has to be cleaned each time. I like it. We've had both. We've had a Remington and we've had a whatchamacallit? Norelco. I like them both. Well, it took 3.5 hours to finish the videotaping of a chat with Glendora. It took 8 hours to make 10 masters. That's 10 1/2-hour programs. No, it was only 7.5 because 2.5 were done from the week before. It took 5 hours to make the dubs. Since there were 10 masters, we needed only 30 dubs. And so that took 5 hours. And it took 8 hours to wrap the tapes for 37 TV systems. And I'll show you the wrap tapes. These are going all over the United States. Blanche gave us 2 delicious things to bring home to eat. We met her at the Beekman Baptist Church. Temperature of 60 degrees in November. It was 60 degrees yesterday, 60 degrees today. Dermot sent you a videotape. Do you want to see it? It's a videotape of the judge, the crooked judge whose brother-in-law was sitting right there in front of him on trial. And I think the judge's name was, well, let me look them all up for you and ask McDermott. So, do you want to see that tape? It's a Barron courtroom. Also Barron of Justice. Rice sent back 2 tapes that they said were damaged and could not be played. And I have to look into those 2 tapes and see if the numbers are my reports on Peter Lane in the Rye City Court. So, Verizon is paid. Installation, $45. MCI Neighborhood Network is paid, $74. And you get all your long distance free and your regional free. And you're just paying for the local service and you're just paying $49.95 a month. But why does it always come out to $74 or something?
Acumen is a dog. Acuteness of mind.
She's so cooperative, helping you not to work, Penny. Listening to words. And now we'll send tenants and neighbors $4. Tenants and neighbors. 105 Washington Street. New York, New York. 10006. We sent Cecilia and Peekskill the application, contract, and proof of residency of McClure. It's the 4th time it's gone to these people. They've done nothing about it. This is from the 8th Circuit in St. Louis, United States Court of Appeals, from Michael Gans, the clerk of the court. I wish to acknowledge receipt of a judicial complaint which you have filed against Michael J. Davis and Jonathan G. Lebedoff. I leave out the honorables. A copy of the complaint has been sent to the Chief Judge of the Circuit for his review and appropriate action. A copy has also been sent to James Rosenthumbaum, Chief Judge of the District of Minnesota. You will be promptly notified of any action taken. And Glendora says, you do things so much better than the abominable 3rd Circuit. See the enclosed. And here's the enclosed from the 3rd Circuit. This will acknowledge receipt of your complaint of judicial misconduct or disability with statement of facts attached against a United States District Judge. The complaint has been docketed as above. A copy of your complaint together with a statement of facts have been served on the respondent judge today. You will be advised when an order is entered on the complaint. Signed, Marcia M. Waldron, Clerk, Bradford A. Baldus, Senior Legal Advisor to the Clerk. They break so many laws they have to have a lawyer. Now they make such fools of themselves in their demented attempts to cover up for the scoundrels. This complaint is about Sue L. Robinson. So they're not going to get away with that. Folks, this is the November 11th, as you can see. It was exactly 9 years ago today that Charles Dolan called Glendora and said he was taking a chat with Glendora off of cable TV in Nassau County, which was nothing but rank censorship and editorial control. Glendora was exposing the law-breaking of Thomas Galato and James Picken and letting Scott Lord operate an underground lawn sprinkling business with no license from the Consumer Affairs Department. And not protecting the consumers of Nassau County. And this was in the newspaper last week, a week ago today, Monday. Cablevision announced the sale of the Bravo cable television network to NBC for about $1 billion. And this is the New York Times analysis of this, about cable and broadcast, and about broadcast TV having at least one channel on cable TV, one network on cable TV. That's hard to understand, isn't it? A broadcast network has a network on Cablevision, on cable TV. But that's what it's about. I don't think any of the rest of this is worth reading to you. I am disappointed to hear this. I wanted Charles Dolan to raise the $1 billion he needs that he put the company in the hole. I want him to raise it by selling the cable TV systems. I want him to get out of public access. I want him to get out. Charles Former, Diane Bennett. I want them all to get out of public access. So we still hope for the sale very soon by Charles Dolan of the cable television systems and get rid of his wacky renewals. This abominable, abhorrent, despicable, abandoned, profligate renewals. They just take hours and hours and hours. They serve no purpose. They're only harassment to try to get rid of public access, but we're not caving in. Times does say that NBC looked at this purchase of Bravo as a way of getting NBC out of Rainbow Media. If you remember 2 years ago, every week I reported on the inadvisability of Rainbow Media and the Rainbow Media tracking stock. Well, now that has come home to rest. That has turned out to be so. It was so then, but they couldn't see it. Now they can see it. The Times does not make it clear how this helps NBC get out of Rainbow Media. Something about $250 million to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. The Beekman Baptist Church has William and Celeste Budrow on the prayer list. And I called Peggy Daddick in Florida. She could get it to Bill Budrow. Bill Budrow never did anything wrong. But the greedy bankruptcy judge and the greedy bankruptcy trustee and the dirty U.S. attorney want his money. So they stole his house. They stole his beautiful house in Connecticut that I used to show to you. And now they've taken everything out of the house and they put it in storage. His beautiful waterfront property on Long Island Sound in Stamford, Connecticut. They stole it from him. And they won't let him out of jail. And his being put into jail was a denial of all of his due process and all of his rights. And they never found that he did anything wrong. They've never proven anything against him. Anything. Not anything. They ruined his family life. He hasn't seen his son for years. The dirty lawyers have taken all of his money and failed precipitously, one after the other. But they've all taken his money, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Imani Taylor is one of them. The judge says that if Imani Taylor doesn't come to the trial, she didn't show up at the hearing, she'll get Bill out of jail because he's wrongfully being held there. She didn't even show up at the hearing. And the judge said that if she doesn't show up at the trial, the judge will arrest the lawyer, Imani Taylor. She lives up here around New York City. So folks, please pray for William and Celeste Budrow. How many cassettes was your Bible lecture?
8?
8 cassettes, 2 sides?
Yes.
And you listened to every one of them?
Yes.
Oh, you deserve applause.
I'd like to find out the name of the man.
The Gospel unto all nations. Bible Alliance. Colossians Bible Messages. Bible Alliance Incorporated, it says.
They're the people who did
P.O. Box
the cassette.
1549. Bradenton, Florida, USA. But it doesn't tell you the man.
Okay.
And you'd like to know the name of the man. But you like to?
You're reading the outside of the cover?
I read everything. I read the outside of the cover, the back of the cover, and the what's on the cassette. Bible Messages. Sound recording. When you finished it before it was due. Did it make you feel better, Frankie?
Well, of course, this is I speak of revivals, which of course were very common in the South, and then Billy Graham came along. The trouble with most of them is they're so emotional. This is giving the same message, so to speak, but it's just you don't have that emotion involved with it. It seems somehow more true and more effective because there is no emotion. And it's the whole thing emphasizes Jesus Christ as the Son of God, who's the mediator between earth and the hereafter, and his strength is that he, or his appeal is that he actually lived on earth and dealt with people and was designated by God as his representative. And obviously there's great emphasis on the way he handled things and somebody who has never been acquainted with the Bible at all, I think it gives good emphasis to the fact that these were all actual people who lived, albeit a long time ago, but they were real people. And so that adds to the force of the whole thing. And the people who wrote the Bible were real people, and they were dealing with real people. And that's the strength of it, and that's the lasting effect, the overall effect of it is that it's not some aberration or something that somebody made up, but these were actual people who lived and had their problems, and the apostles who wrote the Bible were writing about real things, and they were inspired by